wouldn't have been coming towards you unless they had you in mind.
I was the only person in the house. Yeah, believe me, I was very aware of that. Now, the next morning of that event in 1993, when the 5 beings out my window, I never even bothered to look out in the snow to see if there were footprints. I completely denied it. Now, this is 25 years later or so, I feel strongly that some event took place that night that is hidden from my memory. I've tried to go through hypnotic regression to try to investigate that event, and very little has come up.
Well, that I hear a lot. I'll hear people, I was, put in regression, and I remembered everything. I was taken aboard a spaceship and they did this and this. But the majority of people I've talked to on the air and off the air tell me they really don't remember. They just remember little things at the very beginning, and then it's all lost time for the rest of the whole thing.
Well, and certainly if it was lost time and I was asleep, then I would have no way to, I would have no, it's not like I was driving and could say that I got home late or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like the guest I had on here just recently that had a implant removed. Him and his wife were going into town, and all of a sudden he saw a pretty much like what you described. That the other person saw, the triangle type of shape, and next thing like time, kind of like, wow, what happened with the time? That happens quite a bit.
Yes, and the triangle craft is very commonly reported. Especially in this context, in the context of the owl.
Wow.
So here's another. Just tell a real quick one here. A woman. Comes from Brazil. She's in her apartment building in urban Rio de Janeiro, and she watches a craft fly across the sky from her apartment building. She's on her balcony, and it flies behind like a building and just adjacent to the building she's in. And the building is tall and skinny, and it should just fly and come out the other side. And it doesn't. It just, her head is traveling, and she's watching as it moves across the sky, and it doesn't come out the other side. And she says, "Hey, guys, where are you?" At that moment, 2 owls land on her balcony. And those owls lived there for the next 2 months.
Wow.
And so, I've had people, so that's tough to call that one a screen memory. Like, those owls were there for 2 months. And I have a lot of pictures. People send me pictures, people have had contact experience. Say, well, here's the owl that, lives on my back porch. And it's like, they're 5 feet away.
Well, I'm just wondering, this might sound strange, but I'm just wondering if the aliens, for example, are controlling these owls and basically, watching people, and just gathering information.
And I have speculated on that very point in the first book. And now, so if you wanted, oh my gosh, I got owls right out the window right now.
Oh, wow.
So what I do is that when I live in a place with a lot of owls, and it's, I have a little, my studio is in this, we call it the chicken coop. It's a it was a chicken coop that's been redone as a little office. It's very tiny, but it's perfect. And I'm listening, and there's owls right outside right now. But we hear them all the time, so don't read too much into that. So what was I talking about? So if you were like an alien and had all kinds of abilities, whether those be technological or psychical, or you could use telekinesis or look through the eyes of another being or something like that. If you wanted to pick one animal to be like the best drone possible, you would pick the owl, right? It has night vision. It's got stealth technology built right in, right? It can fly silently. It's not that unusual, right? So if you were an abductee, right, and the aliens wanted to spy on you, they could look through the eyes of the owl. And if you saw an owl hanging out in a tree in your yard, you wouldn't think too much of it, as opposed to seeing a hovering UFO, let's say.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, so that I have gone down that avenue. It's a very fruitful avenue of or like line of speculation, right? So I mean, yes, it's perfect. It's the perfect animal to have be as the biological drone.
Now, I'm going to go back, Mike, just for a little bit. The person you went camping with those couple of times, and, she was thinking, that it was kind of like a God type of experience. Has she ever talked to you about UFOs or abductions or her belief in UFOs or anything like that? Or has she ever talked to you about anything that's strangely things that could have happened in her life?
She certainly talked about synchronicity. She says she has had a lot of synchronicity in her life. And we've talked about, I don't think she's ever seen a UFO. I've certainly talked to her about UFOs. I can't remember off the top of my head, but if she had told me a UFO story, I'd remember it. But what she has told me is that she has had a lot of powerful synchronicities in her life. And this is something that I remember I told someone at one point, a friend of mine, and she was helping me edit an essay that I was writing on synchronicity. And in the essay, I said, anyone, like I said that this is something if you go to a UFO support group, let's say, where people who have had abduction experiences, and you ask around the table, who's here has a lot of synchronicities in their life. Everyone, I guarantee, will raise their hand. A powerful, meaningful coincidence in their life, ongoing. And I said that to her. I said, UFO people with UFO contact have more synchronicities than the normal person. And she rolled her eyes and gave me this look like, you doofus. And she said, anyone on a spiritual path will have a lot of synchronicities. And she's correct. I believe she's correct. I mean, I think anyone who is doing the hard work to really dig and really be a seeker will have these synchronicities. And I say that because I've been doing this research now for 10 years, and that's what I'm finding. So the woman, Kristen, has been having a lot of synchronicities in her life. And I take that seriously as a, leaning towards perhaps not being an abductee, but perhaps being a seeker in the important sense of the word, where these powerful events are reflected back at her.
Or on the other hand, she could have been abducted and not even realize it. That
absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely.
I mean,
and I am very cautious to jump to that conclusion. Just because it's almost too easy. Like on one level, you start thinking like that, and it's like, oh my gosh, almost everyone's been abducted. If then it builds in a sort of there's a sort of paranoia built into that.
No, but I actually do think there's been a lot of people that have got free rides on a UFO without ever realizing it, and I think it's a lot more than we even realize.
I think it is probably frighteningly more than we realize it. I think if you took, I would not, whatever I would guess, my sense is it would be higher, the number of people.
Yeah, and it's kind of scary, again, I go back to when Eisenhower was president, supposedly, that he had a meeting with aliens. Now, this is, again, rumors, but internet, and, then some people that were in the military, said, this actually happened, but it's no proof. But, basically that aliens met with Eisenhower. He made concessions with him, basically, for they would not attack Earth, that they would give us some technology, but they wanted something in return. And something in that return was some of our people. And I guess supposedly,
and that might be me.
Yeah, it could be. And then, shortly after that, they, I guess, supposedly broke their pact with the government and abducted a lot more than what it was agreed upon. A lot more.
Yes, and once again, this is a great story. It's a wonderful story, but I'm very cautious to take it at face value because it's, there's very little proof of that story. There's whisperings. There's people who will, so someone can make a good argument that happened. And I've seen people, I've watched presentations where people, make a good argument for that story. But I'm cautious. But it fits in the timeline. And as far as the timeline of when the abductions started to be reported.
Oh, yeah. And one other thing, if you remember Jackie Gleason and Nixon,
Oh yeah, yeah, that's a wonderful story. Yeah.
Yeah, but you know what? Jackie said it was totally true. That he said that Nixon took him to a base and showed him a alien, and he was totally convinced at that point, Jackie Gleason, that there were aliens out there and UFOs, and even Johnny Carson. You remember Johnny Carson?
Oh yeah,
he had an encounter right out of his, right off the ocean, right off of Malibu.
The home was on Malibu. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, he had where he went out on his deck and saw a UFO. And he was a Navy person before he, ever became a writer and a comic and all that stuff. So he had a good military background. So
I agree. Yeah, it's very. I mean, so the number of people who have seen UFOs is very high, and the number of these are credible people. It's all across the spectrum. So, so I could just think just right across the board. Like just 10% is an easy number that gets thrown around. I suspect it's higher than that.
Oh yeah. In fact, there's one guest I'm going to have on every month. She runs a UFO reporting center out of North Carolina, and she claims that she even told me the same story. But she even went farther that basically some of these aliens are not so friendly. There's a group of them basically like humans, but they don't like them like you would like, me, or I would like you. They like them as we would like going to McDonald's.
Well, there's certainly those stories where aliens will, in essence, feed on the emotions of the people. Right? So they'll feed on fear the same way that that someone will binge on chocolate, let's say, and they'll get some sort of sustenance from that. I've heard those stories. I will say that in my research, I rarely hear those stories, and I'm only looking at the owl thing. I'm very myopic in the way I look at this. I'm not an objective researcher. I'm completely subjective. I'm just owls, which is a little bit of a flawed methodology, I guess, but
not really. Mike, it's no different than there's a group of people out there that feel that Bigfoot are tied with aliens too, because a lot of times there have been sightings of Bigfoot and UFOs at the same time at the same place. So I mean, I do feel the owl thing and Bigfoot and some of this others, who knows what else, is all tied into each other.
Yeah.
Now, do you have any more stories from your blog from people, talking about owls?
Oh my gosh.
Well, we got time.
I got more stories than you got time. I could tell you stories until the show's over and then into next week, and then that would turn into next month, and I could keep you busy. Here, I'll tell you, this is one I like a lot. There's a fellow named Ben. He's become a pretty close friend of mine. He's had once again, I have to be very cautious because he tells the kind of stories that an abductee would tell. But when you ask him, he's so hesitant, he won't go there, and I can't push him, and I'm not going to say what's what. But he tells the kind of stories. His personal experiences are the kind of things that someone who's had direct UFO contact would tell. Now, he was driving his kids home from a roller skating party, and they were it was their little birthday party thing, and kids were all little, and they were all in the minivan, and he's driving them home. It's dark out, and they say, come on, tell a story. And he's like, sure. So he tells his UFO stories, his weird paranormal stories, and he'd never told any of these to his kids. So he tells them, and they get into it, and he tells another one. He gets into it, and he said he kind of was cautious the way he framed them. He told them like campfire stories, and then the culmination of all of this is a profound missing time event that he had. He tells this missing time event, and at that moment, as soon as he finishes the punchline of the story, which was, and then I looked at the clock, and there were 2 hours of missing time. At that moment, boom, there's an owl flies right across his windshield. There's a little bit more to this story. There's other things, too, that are connected with this. But later, some months later, he takes his kids on a hike. And they go on a hike, and they're walking down this path. And he's living in New England. And there's an owl that follows them. They walk down the path, and the owl flies past them and lands on a branch. They walk past the owl, and it flies further down the trail and lands on a branch. That's